Hello, everyone, and thank you very much for joining us today for this Stay Ahead with Yara webinar. With me today, I have the legend, my good friend, Kostin Rayu. Hi, Kostin.
Hello. Good evening.
And actually, Kostin knows Yara probably better than, but probably Victor knows more about Yara,
For sure.
but
I don't know much. I
I'm
just
sure.
use it. I use it and make a lot of mistakes.
Well, I know for a fact this is not true, but at the same time, I think it's always useful to discuss some ideas about Yara. And this is what we are going to do in this webinar. We want to go through some lessons learned to show you what's new, to show you new capabilities, to discuss new things that you can do in VirusTotal with Yara, including fancy new editor that everybody who saw it really love it, because creating Yaras by clicking a stuff is kind of new for everyone. You don't really need to remember all the fields in the modules. You just click around and you get the Yara done. So it's something very interesting. But let's get started. So we have some slides today. Maybe your cousin want to start.
Of course. Here we go. Um, so before we begin, happy Thanksgiving to those of you who celebrate Thanksgiving. We do want to say thanks for joining us, especially at such a time, or if you're watching this as a recording, we appreciate the interest and feel free to drop comments during the webinar. Use the comments option to ask questions. So just even if you have like some let's say simple notes or of course if something is unclear, just feel free to use the questions button in Bright Talk. Of course, we will share links to the older webinars on this topic near the end of our talk today. And if you want to keep in touch with us, feel free to follow Vicente and myself on X and other social medias. It's at Cryo and at Trompi. So, a few words about ourselves. Me, I'm Kostin Raju. I've been in the industry for actually over 29 years, and I still enjoy it. Like every morning when I wake up, I'm so excited to try to discover some new things or to learn something new, which is what keeps me going. And especially when it comes to APTs and 0 days, those are pretty much, let's say, the topics that really make me tick. In my spare time, I play chess as well as try to get my black belt in Taekwondo. And I can say that I'm a big fan of VirusTotal and a big fan of Yara, thanks to the wonderful folks at VirusTotal, to Bernardo, Julio, and of course Victor for releasing these amazing tools, which, in my opinion, they helped shape the industry. And Vicente, former colleague of mine, we worked together in Great, who is now a threat intelligence strategist for VirusTotal, and who during his spare time builds Warhammer miniatures, a bit too many of them according to his wife. All right, so what is Yara? Now, to be honest, we will not get too much into details about what is Yara and the basics of that. But for everybody, let's say if you haven't heard this before, it's sometimes called the pattern matching Swiss knife for malware researchers and everyone else. You can find the source codes on GitHub, and there's also precompiled binaries for Windows 64 and 32-bit. The latest stable version is from June. That's version 4.3.2. And version 4.0, 4.4.0 is actually a release candidate one. And this version has a ton of new features and improvements. So actually, me personally, I'm using 4.4.0 RC1, which I found to be very stable, very fast, very good. Now, For a bigger introduction to Yara, please feel free to check the link at the end of the webinar. Myself and Vicente did a deep dive into Yara about 2 years ago, and the recording on Bright Talk, we will show the link at the end. Now, where do you find Yara rules? They can probably be found in a lot of public threat intelligence reports, such as from private companies, certs, different government organizations. They publish Yara all the time. I think it was earlier today that I've seen a set of new Yara rules from CISA. But essentially, if you are into threat intelligence or IT security, you've probably seen a lot of Yara rules so far. And even, let's say, if you're not into IT security, there's a good chance that there are actually Yara rules on your computer. So, for instance, every Mac running OS X actually has a set of Yara rules in there, part of XProtect. So, OS X is actually using Yara rules internally to keep the system safe and to detect potentially unwanted stuff. There's of course a lot of closed but as well as public exchange groups where you can find good and bad Yara rules. As always, it's important to differentiate, to test them before deploying them in productions, especially. There's a lot of sets of Yara rules on GitHub, as well as private sources. For instance, if you have a subscription to a private intelligence service um, from, let's say, either CrowdStrike or Mandiant or Kaspersky, or pretty much um, all the other companies out there who provide private intelligence, they probably give you Yara rules as well. And of course, there's a good chance that some of you have written your own Yara rules. Um, so let's say as a question, if you're if you're listening to us, if you have written at least one Yara rule, please feel to submit a question, and in the question field, just write the number of Yara rules that you have written so far. So if you've written just one rule, put one. Maybe you've written like 10 rules or 50 rules. Just put these numbers, submit it as a question to us, just to get an idea um, who and let's say how many Yara rules have you guys written so far. So I'd be very curious to see actually from the audience who maybe has written the most Yara rules. Now, of course, over time, analysts can accumulate very large sets with maybe even thousands of Yara rules, which in my experience, it can become a serious problem. And let's say one top issue with having thousands of Yara rules can actually be speed. So when you're running like tens of thousands of Yara rules, suddenly uh, you have a serious problem. Basically, scanning anything can take a very long time. So we are getting a couple of answers. We have Matt with hundreds of Yara rules, as well as Ronnie, Saj Han has written over 30. And then we have Hofre with 4, KH with 10 and hundreds. David says he loves Yara. I love Yara as well. So when you have hundreds, I think that's manageable. When you have thousands, you may actually have a problem. When you have tens of thousands, you have probably a serious problem. Just to give you an example, scanning collection of a few terabytes of data with a few thousands of Yara rules, at least in my case, it takes about 3 days. So it may be the case that you can't actually wait for that long. And the other issue that I see a lot is the fact that Yara rules are actually almost alive, if you want, in the sense that they require continuous maintenance in order for them to be efficient, fast, and still work as intended. And probably the best example here is that if you have some older Yara rules in your collection, there's a good chance that you may find that some of them have this thingy $mz equals uppercase mz, and the condition starts with something like $mz at 0. And I spent a couple of hours earlier this year going through pretty much all my Yara rules and trying to get rid of this. Back, I would say in 2015, this was a popular method of actually checking if a file is a Windows or a DOS executable. Um, Please feel free to drop us a note again as a comment if you have seen such Yara rules with the $mz header check, or even better, if you actually change some of your Yara rules to get rid of this old style header check. Now, this $mz equals mz may be inefficient in the sense that what happens here is that Yara produces this string $mz equals mz, so it actually looks for mz for this 2-byte string all throughout the file. It saves all the hits unless you're running it with the -f flag, and that can take a lot of memory, and it also can be pretty slow. So that's why over time people started using uint16 of 0 equals 0x5a for d. We have a comment that mz at 0 is old school. Absolutely, it's super old school, but you'd be surprised how many Yara rule set collections that I have seen, they still have this $mz at 0. And this is actually okay for Windows P executables, but there's a catch, by the way. The catch here is that, for instance, DOS executables they can start with ZM as well. And what happens there is that if you have a malware and there's a simple swap, like instead of MZ you have ZM, your Yara rule won't find the malware, and the malware will still happily run on DOS. Again, I don't know who uses DOS nowadays. In Windows, actually, in the latest versions of Windows, they fixed this. So if the executable starts with the ZM, Windows complains that there's something bad going on there. But yeah, if you want to do it like, let's say, like a complete check, that would be uint16 of 0 equals 5a for d, or uint16 of 0 equals 4d 5a, so the other way around. And then more recently, I've seen a lot of people using the PE module. PE is PE. After all, you might think that why should I bother with all these header checks? I have to think about the MZ header in a little endian storage, so I need to write it the other way around. And if you type it by hand, maybe sometimes you'll make some mistakes, and suddenly your Yara rule doesn't work anymore. So how about like just PE is PE from the PE module? It sounds like a very simple, straightforward, and maybe this can actually take care of, I don't know, all sorts of future situations as well. Now, if you do the check, like I said, with the uint16 of 0 equals 5a for d, that's absolutely fine. I think it's a good practice also to have a file size check as well. At the same time, with some of the more recent rules, I've seen cases when people actually not only check for the MZ header, but also they check for the PE header as well. And the way of doing that is, like in this example, at offset 3C in the file, there's actually the offset of the PE header. So there's a double check, MZ at 0, and then PE. If you ask me, this is a bit unnecessary. It's a bit like overkill. You don't actually gain any kind of speed. On the contrary, there's a chance that this may be slower. And at the same time, I don't think that you actually gain a lot of accuracy, because the chances for a file to have your strings, have the MZ header, but not the PE header, they're also pretty low. And then, of course, when you're checking for other file formats such as ELF files, typically used on Linux, but other operating systems, or in the case of Mac OS, they have the Mac executable format. Then you need to check for all these different kind of things like feed face CF, and the reversed versions in case of little or big endian. So the header check actually may become a bit tricky just to get everything right. Just imagine if you also want to include all the two files. Now, there's an interesting catch here. I see that some of you are saying that you actually prefer using pe.ispe. And there's a very interesting test that was implemented by Daniel Robertson. I don't know if he's actually over there, like right now in the webinar with us, but if he is, thank you for doing this test. As I was about to do it by myself, I found his work. And he actually checked with a large collection just to see what is the fastest, most efficient way of testing for the header. So he discovered that, let's say, in average, his empty dummy rule was taking about 631. The MZ at zeros, it was 6.61 seconds. And the uint16 of 0 was, I would say, only slightly slower than the dummy at 634. So there's like almost an insignificant impact from doing this header check. But then if you do the PE speed, the speed impact from that is absolutely devastating. So instead of 6 seconds, the average went all the way up to 38 seconds. So if you're aiming for the absolute best speed over there, you definitely want to do the uint16 of 0. So maybe go through your older rules and get rid of the $MZ check and make sure everything is implemented is the most efficient way. As time passes, actually, it's a possibility, that with more and more Yara rules, these kind of things, they really make a difference. Another example here is that in some countries, the government mandates organizations to scan their infrastructure with Yara rules, and there's I've seen absolutely huge sets of, I think, even hundreds of thousands of Yara rules being used for this purpose, and essentially, these kind of little differences, they really make a huge difference in terms of speed. Yeah, that's also a good observation from Jakub, who's saying that uint16 will not cause too many matches. Absolutely. So $MZ, when you do that, Yara will actually save pretty much all the offsets where the $MZ string was found. And that can be, yeah, absolutely like millions. Also, Ronnie is saying, will there be any noticeable difference between uint16 and uint16 big endian? I don't think there'll be any difference because actually this is implemented by just checking the constant the other way around. So in practice, there's absolutely no impact, no difference. And I admit, honestly, I do use uint32 BE myself when it comes to checking things like the OLED2 header doc file or the ELF header. Probably too lazy to reverse it and do the uint32 instead of the uint32b, not to mention if you have to do something like uint64. Now, also what happens is that going through different sets of commercial rule sets, there's a lot of cases when you see the rule is slowing down scanning. And these are some examples on the screen here that I put together. Basically, there's just too many wildcards, and Yara can't build the proper trees, the proper search trees. You will get the rule is slowing down scanning. And in reality, this is slowing down the scanning significantly. So one of the things that I've been doing as well, is just to try to get rid of all the warnings in all the Yara rules. And if you look at some of the professional sets, such as those coming from Florian Roth, you will see that they have actually zero warnings. There's essentially no warnings. It may be difficult in some cases. I've seen malware myself where it was really difficult to implement some generic detection without wildcards and without slowing down the scanning. But in the end, I decided to just maybe compromise a bit on detection on the side of speed. And of course, you can think about having two different sets of rules that you want maybe for hunting in some limited scenarios, and then in the production rules, my advice is just to avoid, just try to avoid all these warnings and slowing down scanning. Here's another example here. I'm curious to ask for your opinion. What do you think? We have this slow and error rule. Do you actually spot what the error is here? And please feel free to post as a comment. What do you think the error is? And of course, maybe there's no error. And if you just take this and you put it into Yara, it will happily run. So I'll be waiting a bit for your answers and your opinions, and really appreciate that.
Costin, while we wait, I wanted to ask one of the questions we had
Mhm.
just before we forget, because I think it also applies to what you were explaining. Sash actually is asking if P might be less effective as it might require a fully P compliant binary. And he's talking about dump binaries from memory, which of course it may be that a rule with this condition will not work. So I was thinking maybe you want to say a few words regarding this, well, having this into account, this warning when you are using this against memory dumps and things
Mhm.
like that.
Yeah, that's a good point there. To be honest, I haven't looked at Wesley's implementation of PE East PE. Honestly, I don't know why it actually is that much slower. But if you ask me, I would personally use the UN16 simply for speed and the fact that maybe sometimes less is more, in the sense of less checks means that maybe you have the chance to catch maybe more files, or even like things such as dumped binaries that might have perhaps a corrupted import table, but at the same time they might be interesting to analyze anyways. So we have already some answers. And by the way, I hope that answers Saj's question. But Saj also answering that the second rule is actually the same as the first, which is true. And then Ronnie actually, yeah, he spots the jump bytes at end, which is that two over there. So what happens with this rule when actually you put it in Yara, it will actually throw a warning and an error at the same time. And this is actually how it looks like. Dollar $A1 is slowing down scanning, and actually the $2 is a syntax error. Now the funny thing is that older versions of Yara actually accepted this as a valid rule. So what used to work in old versions is no longer working in recent ones. So I've seen commercial. I don't know why anyone would actually do that, because those uh, question marks or the square brackets at the end, they're superfluous, they're useless. Uh, so I don't know why anyone would do that unless it's actually by mistake, copy pasting code, maybe from IDA or from some IDA plugin that generates Yara rules. So excluding the opcodes or the operands. But yeah, in this case, it may be that an older Yara rule that used to work quite nicely in old versions of Yara, it doesn't work with the most recent ones. So you may want to actually go through older Yara rules and try to get rid of any such artifacts. Another example here is, well, the question with this rule, do you think it's a good rule or is it a bad rule? So again, feel free to drop some comments for us. If you think that this is inefficient for some reason, or is there something wrong with it, please feel free to drop some comments. It's a rule that I got from a public source, so it's absolutely a rule that you can find on the internet. Ronnie says that well, file size, yeah, the lack of a file size might be an issue here, which is absolutely correct. So what happens is um, with such maybe shorter strings, what can happen here, and by the way, there's no header check as well, is when you scan something like a disk image, which is hundreds of gigabytes in size, or a VM image, as one of our listeners was actually asking earlier, that there's a good chance that these three different strings might actually occur in different files, which in the disk image, it doesn't really matter. And that triggers the detection. So what we also do, and what I do in a lot of cases, is to go through my older rules, see which ones don't have a file size check, and add a file size check. Of course, there's cases when the file size check might not be very productive, so there's like exceptions as well. But nevertheless, I think it really makes sense. And well, you may, like I said, you may want to improve the speed of all the rules by upgrading their header checks, fix all the warning. Again, a summary of what we discussed so far, and avoid picking too big wildcards, and the P checks only when absolutely necessary. Try to use -f where possible, which means avoid counting the occurrences of a string in a file. That actually makes a significant difference when scanning large sets. And there is an option which I want to mention, which is new in Yara 4.2.0, which really made a significant difference for me, which is -z, or skip larger. And this allows Yara to skip files that are larger than a given size when scanning a directory. So what I do here, for instance, is I put something like skip larger and 100 megabytes if I know for sure that what I'm looking for is definitely not in such big files. And why is this important? Because you might think, yeah, but I put file size less than a megabyte. Even if you have the file size less than a megabyte in the condition, Yara still opens the files, reads the entire file in memory. Even if it's like, I don't know, a gigabyte or 10 gigabytes, it still maps it in memory and goes through the entire file looking for all the strings, and only at the end, when evaluating the condition, that's when it actually sees, oh, the file is 1 gigabyte, but the condition is file size less than a meg, then I'll just skip it. But nevertheless, you wasted a lot of time reading the file, scanning it for strings, saving all the hits, and so on. So this option, skip larger, it is really useful, in my opinion. For instance, when you're scanning collections where there's tons of data. So typical example is here scanning a file server, and you have ISO images on the file server, or VXD images, or QEMU, IMG images, and so on. So that can actually speed up the scan a lot. In terms of the life cycle, I was saying in the beginning, the Yara rules are kind of alive in a sense, if you want. And the typical case here is that I start writing a Yara rule, and I'm very happy. I don't know, it catches the initial sample, but doesn't catch anything else besides the initial sample. So obviously it needs a bit of improvement. Then it's too lax, and it catches too much stuff, including stuff that is unrelated, or perhaps stuff that is just false positives. So we fine-tuned the rule a bit with a bit more precision, more careful with the header, more careful with the file size, more careful with the strings, perhaps full word on the strings. And then you have a good Yara rule that catches new stuff regularly. So that's the ideal case. Then, in my experience, in this period of time, it takes usually about from 6 months maybe to 1 year, when the Yara rule actually stops catching anything at all. It just doesn't catch stuff anymore because the malware authors, they moved on. They don't use that malware anymore now that it has been exposed, or they rewrite the malware in some new language like Rust, which is uh, quite popular at the moment, or Golang, and then your Yara rule just doesn't catch anything anymore. And the worst case, which maybe in a couple of years, that your Yara rule starts having false positives, and I think that's a good moment when you need to go back and try to evaluate, does it still make sense to have this Yara rule anywhere. Perhaps it needs improvement, and then you try to find some newer samples from that malware family and improve the Yara rule a bit, or to write a new one. But in practice, there is a limited time span during which Yara rules are effective. And that's what I mean. The fact that they are alive from some point of view is that they require constant maintenance. So, one example here from 2015, there's a Yara rule from Noveda Solutions. So there's an RSA key. This rule, unfortunately, doesn't catch anything anymore. So if you have it on VirusTotal, it won't catch any new samples. Perhaps it will catch some of the older samples, but in terms of catching new stuff, yeah, this RSA key in there, it will not be reused in any new malware. So if you're wondering how do you write a good Yara rule that works for a longer period of time, I think the best advice here, best practices would be to use multiple conditions, like maybe three sets of conditions, some kind of unique strings, maybe. So you can use any of them. Then a combination of strings that might not be unique, such as let's say 5 of 10, something like that. So that can also work. And if there's any chance, you can, let's say, do some metadata, for instance, checking the compilation timestamps, or perhaps some of the properties of the import directory, imhash, and so on. That's another possibility. And bypassing all these three conditions is not just more difficult for the malware authors, but the chance of that happening naturally is also much lower. Um, so there's another question or observation here is from David Tyler, saying we use RetroHunt to help us test our Yara rules to quickly see if they'll catch anything. Is it maybe too restrictive if they catch nothing, or if they catch too much? Absolutely. That's a perfect case, and I do absolutely the same. Except, of course, don't want to burn my RetroHunt quota, so I do a lot of testing locally on my local collections. I also don't want to hammer VirusTotal, so there's more processing power for you guys instead. Um,
We appreciate that.
and I also appreciate you guys allowing me to use VirusTotal. So thank you for that, Vicente and Bernardo. And another question from Saj would be if separate grouped conditions are better than separate rules. Um, I think they are the same, unless it depends. So, for instance, you can have, let's say, a bunch of $A strings, and the condition there is all of A, and then you have a bunch of B strings, and then the condition is maybe any of A and 4 of B. And yeah, in order to do that, you definitely need to put them into the same rule, or just to use the first rule as a condition in the second rule. So I hope that clarifies things.
I just want to make a very, very quick observation. I think it's very important everything you said about the life cycle. And actually, we are working on improving that for our crowdsourced rules. Probably during Q1 next year, we will be seeing some of the results. But things like the rule you show, where some key might have been stolen and then used by some actor, here is fundamental the time frame when you see the samples.
Hmm.
And we will be talking later, but using some external modules like VT module, which help you get some metadata, because of course, compilation date can be changed, can be forged, but things like first submission and last submission can really help to to polish your YAR rules. So you go straight to the point before this key was used by every single malware author to sign their sample or things like that. And that helps big time to make your rules accurate and distinguish before something becomes used by every other malware author.
Yeah, thanks for the comment, Vicente. And I'm really looking forward to see more in how you guys use the latest features in VirusTotal. So we don't have much time, which is why I'll go very quickly through these new language features. There's a lot of new things that were added to Yara 4.3.0, such as, for instance, a not operator. That's something that I wanted for such a long time. I wasn't sure how to do it. So, like one, for instance, not two and three. So, super useful. Another thing which is quite fun, in my opinion, the percentage, like 20 percentage of them. So that's nice because, as you probably, let's say, you can increase the number of strings, but the condition remain like 20%, right? And some oldies but goldies such as XOR for strings, the CRC32 hash module, and the time module, which is another super useful thing. For instance, you wanted to find, let's say, files compiled in the future, but the question is, what's the current time, right? And that's where you can use a time module to see if you have any files that were compiled in the future. So very briefly, that was all from my side. And Vicente, this is your ship from here.
Thank you, Costin. Actually, we are just going to refresh some of the new stuff that we have in VirusTotal regarding Yara. I will just quickly go through this, and then we will do a small demo, and then we'll go for the final Q&A because we are accumulating a lot of questions. Um, Basically, everything Costin explained, which is great, is great advice. Everything refers to the traditional Yara by itself that you can use on your own. Later, we realized, okay, maybe we can add some cool stuff, and we created the VT module, which is available if you are doing your light hands and retro hands in VirusTotal. And here we can start using metadata, which is great, plus behavior. For instance, the case we were discussing before is some certificate is stolen, for instance, and is used by some author. Actually, that happened, it was NVIDIA, right? The certificates were stolen last year, around March or something like that. It was the key difference before and after the publication was made, where everybody started to use the stolen certificate. But before that, it was the real authors who were started to sign some malware. So this can be very helpful for attribution and distinguishing the time frame where you want to refer to your rule. So the BT module is really good because it's adding a lot of information and context. But it's only applicable to files. So there are more entities that could be used in your hunting, in this case, URLs, domains, and IPs. And we decided to add them also for Yara, which we call Yara Netloc. And well, you can find the full documentation. Let's simply see a few examples, but there are some publications we made. There is a previous webinar we did about this with some examples. But basically, it's the same principle, but in this case, we have new entities. Everyone has new attributes, and with this, you can simply search using YARAs and try to hunt whatever it's important for you. I think I didn't say before. You were discussing about retro hands just to check how efficient a YARA rule is, which makes all the sense in the world. Sometimes you can use also BT intelligence when applicable. If you can translate your YARA rule into some query and check, or at least individually, how prevalent are the different conditions that you are adding. sometimes it's possible and can help you to quickly iterate your rule until it's providing you with the results that you want, at least in the condition part. So here we have a few very basic examples. And this is based in what I said. We have the intelligence query and how this will be translating into some rule. The rules that I'm describing now, as I said, are using the new entities for Yara with the VT module. And at the same time, they are live hand. Still, this is not available for retro hand, but it will be soon. In this case, the VTI query is searching for domains, and there is an regex looking for, in this case, Santander, which is a Spanish bank entity, inside of the domain, and with one or more positive detections by antiviruses. Here you can see how this translates into conditions into .vt, which is the module that we are using, and now .net, .domain, and then analysis stats, which will go for the last analysis from antiviruses, in this case for one or more malicious detections. And then we can check inside of the content for a regular expression if it is matching this Santander one that we just put in the VTI query. Second example we have is using URLs. Similarly, we are checking that the parent domain is Dropbox. We want to check if there are any positive detections in the response that we get from the URL. And in this case, this translates into the vt.net.domain root is dropbox.com. And then we are checking if the downloaded file is detected as malicious by, in this case, well, is more than 4, but it should be more than 5. And here we should clarify that downloaded file will be the last downloaded file. Probably this is not super clear. We are working into improve the clarity of the different features that are provided with every entity. And there we are looping the different signatures, checking for some detection in particular. In this case, if the signature contains ransom. I contains is just for, say, case sensitiveness. This way, we are checking if any Dropbox, in this case, URL, is serving any kind of ransomware. This will be one way to do it. Ronnie is asking if it will be possible to convert a query into live hand or retro hand with the VT module. Actually, we have some blog posts on this, and it's not immediately possible for all cases. In many cases, it's like almost the same. It will be cool to have this possibility. We've been discussing about this. I don't know. Maybe at some point we will make the effort and try to make it happen. But it's not always possible. It's a pity, but it is in most of the cases. And here in the final example, we are going for an IP. In this case, we have some ASN that we want to check if the IP belongs to. Again, the different detections, more than one, like for antiviruses. And then we are checking the last downloaded file and also communicating file, which could be any other file in VirusTotal that for some reason is communicating to this IP. And in this case, if it is malicious. And this is great because this is not only something that we have seen being downloaded, but something that could be just communicating for any reason. It's a great way to monitor your infrastructure, for instance. You can see here the PTI query as well. And there is a final example we have. Actually, my colleague Alex was working on this regarding some phishing attempts, how to detect some phishing URLs. There are like many different methods. There is a full category from antiviruses for phishing, potential phishing sites inside of VirusTotal. We were checking, in this case, let's go to the rule. we're checking for ing phishing. So there are a few strings as usual. You can see it's very basic ing. Okay, is one we want to check with some blanks just to isolate the term, and then bank in different ways and login, which is what any attacker will put to steal your credentials. And the thing that we are checking first is that this is a new URL, meaning that it's been never seen before in VirusTotal. So we will just be getting fresh stuff. And then we are checking that the domain root is not ing. So we have some um, regular expression here. Finally, we can also check the who is data. In this case, it's an array. We are checking the create date. And I know that maybe all this new module with all these new different elements might sound a bit, well, complicated because, well, how do I know who is? How do I know this data? If this is an array? I will be getting into this in a minute. But we can check the create date. So again, with this, we just make sure to get some fresh stuff other than being new. The domain was just created. And we can also check the title, the HTML title that will appear to the potential victim containing this ing login. And then we can also check for all the other strings. And actually, with this, my colleague detected some new phishing stuff, which is great. And here we can see a screenshot of what she detected, which, by the way, had 0 detections at the time. Uh, we didn't put the condition and just going back, but we could also check if the number of detections as an additional condition. All right. So all of this is good, but let's go into the demo. Let's see the real stuff. So let me just quickly share my screen. Hopefully everything will be visible for everyone. So we are in VirusTotal. I want to show you a bunch of things. If we go into hunting, I will go into Lifehand, where we store all the different Lifehand stuff. Here, the first thing I wanted to show is a crowdsourced Yara hat. Why this is interesting? This is interesting because here you have a way to search for any crowdsourced rule instead of simply finding in your results that some of your files are matching a given Yara rule, and from here pivoting. So we can search for whatever we want, and I don't know, some wiper. We can filter by author, modification date, whatever. And then we can check the rule if we like it, if we are okay with this. This is from Florian, which we were discussing before. We can do different stuff. We can copy the rule, we can download it, we can import it into Lifehand or into a RetroHand, or we can simply see the matches. In this case, as I said, we don't really need to just randomly find the rule until we find something interesting. We can simply go into the crowdsourced Yara hub and sort and search and filter and check which ones are fresher. We can see here the number of matches, so we get an idea of what kind of rules they are, etc., etc. For instance, we have this hermetic wiper again. We can see the results. Well, there are many rules in VirusTotal that we import from different repositories. Of course, nobody knows them by heart, so this is a great resource to handle your rules. But this is not really what I wanted to show. I wanted to show how we can create new rules with the new entities. So now when we go into Lifehand, as I said, they're still only available for Lifehand. We can specify if we want to do a rule for a file, for an URL, for a domain, or for an IP. Let's go for the good old files. And here, first thing I want to show is the fancy new editor we have for Yara, which in my opinion is absolutely stunning. And here we have different things of interest. First of all, we have templates. What are templates? Templates are helping us to create rules from scratch in case we don't really have much information, or we simply can reuse them because why not? We want to detect new files detected as ransomware. So we can simply add here with a click, and there is a proposed rule. Of course, it's up to us to use it or not, but probably this can be a great help to start working in some rule. You may notice that in the metadata, we have target entity. This is metadata. Of course, you can put whatever you want, but given that now we are working with different entities, we thought it made sense. So that's why you will find it in any new rule proposed by the template. So this is one thing. The second interesting thing is that now we have in this maybe a bit hidden thing that says a structure, one of the most powerful things we did for Yara, which is we can paste a hash to create a rule based on its attributes. So for instance, let's get this sample and we just load it. And the idea is that we will get the full JSON with all the information that we will get in VirusTotal if we will get this file, let's say by the API. And you can see here all the different attributes. So we start with the behavior, the registry key is open. I will just collapse because it's too big. The number of verdicts, the mutex is created, uh, well, everything related to behavior as it is detonating in the sandbox. So there's a lot of information. And then we have the metadata. So we have all the signatures from the different antiviruses. We have different hashes for similarity, the file name, the type of the file, the size, and then if it was seen in the wild, and the signatures of the site it was in the wild, and the response headers. Well, you know that the JSON is huge, but all the information is here. Now, why this is amazing? The reason this is amazing is that from now on, we don't really need to know all the syntax for Yara and for the module, for the VT module. We can simply click and it will be adding any condition into our rule. You can see here it's creating a new rule, just to avoid confusion. Maybe you can simply copy everything in one, depending what you want to do, and or whatever. But everything is just click and appearing here. So you don't really need to remember how to get this information. You don't really need to remember the module. You don't really need to I don't know, suffer for any loop that you need to do, because now you just need to click and you will get everything in your Jara rule added to the condition. So any field that you see here should be clickable and should be able to add into the condition. In this case, of course, is probably not ideal how we did it, but you can see the idea. We are just adding stuff by clicking, and this is such a time saver. So let's say that you created your rule based on this information. Still, you're not very sure. And here, let me show you something else. So let me just delete everything. We will just keep the original template for Yara. Um, and you were saying, oh, yes, I can run sometimes some retrohams. Well, if you want to test, now you can just simply test here. You see this test box. You can put your samples and run the test. And then you will see if the rule is matching or is not matching the different samples that you are having here, if there was any problem when running this, etc., etc. So in this case, the rule doesn't match this entity, of course, because this is just the Yara template. But let's, I don't know, check this one. And let me just delete the previous one. Let's do the same and run the test against the same rule. In this case, is matching. So, well, this is a very quick and nice and clean way to test your rules. Let's say you have 5 or 6 samples, 7, and they are in VirusTotal. You can simply go here and check if they are working properly. All of this is working for Lighthand rules, and all the results, just to finish the demo, will go into the IOC stream. So the IOC stream is where all the results from all your different rules will be unified in one single place. So no need to jump into live hand, retro hands, or whatever. You will simply have here all the results, and then you can filter by when they were matched, where they are coming from, if they are from some threat actor you are subscribed, retro hands, the hunting rule set, which are live hands, or collections that you are subscribed. There are like different ways to get your IOCs in one single place, and then you can filter by files, URLs, domains, or IP addresses, depending what you are searching for. But all the data will be in one single place, which hopefully will make things easier for everybody and in order to find all the results from all the different hunting stuff that you are doing. All right. So I think with this, I finished my demo. I think we have one last slide, if I'm not mistaken. Let me put it, which is showing some additional resources that Costin put here. Uh, Basically, this is our previous webinar we did on Yara, which is a probably more complete introduction with some basic pro tips in how to create rules, which you can find also in BrightTalk. I think it's also in VirusTotal YouTube channel. And here we have a very interesting project that Costin just started, available in X or Twitter. I don't know how to say anymore. Maybe you can say a few words about this, Costin.
Yeah, sure. Um, well, of course, I think would be good to have it everywhere, like on Blue Sky and Mastodon. So I'm working on that. Um, Essentially, I think this is a problem that a lot of you have seen as well in the past, which is that some company publishes a cool report, but there's no samples on VT. And maybe they're not shareable at that moment. So you think, okay, maybe they'll become available in a couple of weeks, and you keep checking every day. But unfortunately, there's nothing, and as time passes, you forget about it. This happened to me a lot of times, but then eventually one of those samples or all of them they appear on VT, but you don't know, like you don't remember or you don't check. So that's why I put together something that I wanted to do for a long time, a small project where I add IOCs from all public reports that I read, as well from my own research. And whenever a sample that was not previously available on VT appears, then you get a notification, so you can play with those samples as well. So you feel free to follow it on Twitter or X. It's now _on_ VT. And of course, if you have any ideas on how to improve it or what else to add to it, feel free to drop me a message. That's at Cryo or to now on VT.
All right, so we have a couple of minutes. Maybe we can go through some of the questions we have. By the way, thanks a lot for all the feedback and interaction. It was great. We have a lot of questions, so I don't know. I will start with some of the first ones, and let's simply combine answers, I guess. Link to the webinar. Well, I guess if you're here, you have it. But we will have also the video in VirusTotal PT YouTube channel. But in Python you can always get it. There is one question: will Yara core, not the VT module, ever support conditions based on the file name? Actually, I saw this at the very beginning. I will ask Victor. I'm not sure about this because I'm not sure this is the philosophy of Yara itself. I understand this could be nice to have, um, but I guess it's easy to script, right? Simply send to Yara the files that have some certain pattern in the name. But yeah, I don't know the answer, to be honest. There is a question from how to use Yara against virtual hard disk, VHD or VHDX for a live incident for IOC search. I don't know, Costin, if you know if there
Yeah,
is any
yeah,
tool for
sure.
this.
The best way here would be just to mount. You mount the VHD in Windows. You can mount it as read only. You scan it and you unmount it. So there's a lot of blog and tutorials on how to mount it on Windows. I guess it should also be pretty straightforward on Linux or other OSs. But essentially, you need to mount the virtual machine disk image for that.
Yeah, I don't know if there is any tool doing this for you, like for pickup or something, but probably it's the easiest
Just
way, as you say.
Windows tools. Windows tools can do that. I've done it in the past. You just use typical Windows tools.
Yeah. So there is a comment about YARAX, about the next generation Yara. Will the Yara language change a lot from Yara to YARAX, or both will support the same Yara language? Last time I spoke to Victor, I don't think it's a new generation of Yara. I think it's more like an experimental Yara where he is playing to implement this in a different language. I think he's doing this in Rust. And I don't know if it is thought like a new generation or something like that. So I wouldn't worry about this. I think the main project is still Yara, and I don't think this will change. And Yara X is more experimental, maybe some experimental features that then we'll jump to Yara, or I don't know. I don't think this will be like a new thingy.
I think, by the way, this is a very cool project, and I know a lot of people. They now integrate Yara in maybe in their EDR solutions, right? But more and more people writing their EDR or whatever agents in Rust, they want to integrate Yara natively. Just not have to worry about buffer overflows or other problems. So that's like a super cool development.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, again, I think the original idea from Victor is just, hey, I want to do something in Rust, but we can talk to him. And there is a comment about open sourcing the VTJAR module. I guess that the idea will be like, I don't know, you put some API key. I don't know how it will be in terms of efficiency having something like that, because you will need to download the metadata from VT or the JSON from all the files that you're scanning. So I'm not really sure. I don't think there are plans on this, but as you say that you have some ideas, well, we can discuss if you want, but I'm not really sure about this. What else? Some comments about Mastodon. Um, well, I don't have Mastodon yet. You have Mastodon, Costin?
I do, and Blue
Hmm.
Sky, but not Threads. Threads, I think it's not available in Romania yet.
Hmm. Yeah, I'm not sure about that. I will take a look. And well, there are many other comments, but I think that we solve hopefully some of the main questions. So I think we can end here. I think it was a very interesting and nice session, Cousin. I really appreciate you helping and offering, as always, as good friend and providing very, very interesting and insightful information.
Well, very happy to do this anytime with you guys, Vicente, and thanks everybody for joining. Again, happy Thanksgiving. Hope the turkey is in the oven, crispy and juicy and everything. And if you're writing Yara rules, please make sure to check the header, make sure that they don't have warnings and they're all good, fast. And if you have any other questions, post our webinar. Do feel free to send them to us on Twitter, Mastodon, Blue Sky. We'll be monitoring them, LinkedIn. And thanks again. Thanks for joining.
Thank you, everyone. Have a nice day. Bye.
Bye bye.